In 1834, the first settlers came to Liberty Township. Just 5 years later, in 1839, 6 people, all related, began to meet together as a Methodist class. A circuit rider named Reverend Hall visited the group regularly.
What's a circuit rider?
Well, he was like a pastor. The circuit was like these groups of churches that shared a pastor. The pastor would ride a horse to different churches each week. The lay leader would keep the church going when the pastor wasn't there.
Do we have a lay leader?
Yeah, that's Bill, who gets the church started, and Phil, who takes the microphone around for prayers. They still keep things going.
So 6 people got together, and 175 years later, they started, we are continuing?
Yeah, because those 6 people decided to follow Jesus and to meet together. We can meet here today. They share Jesus, person to person, from generation to generation, all the way down to us. 21 years after that first group, they decided to build a church building. It wasn't easy, though. The lumber caught on fire, so more poplar trees had to be cut, sawed, and dried. It took a few years before the building was finally done.
Wow, I guess not everything is always easy.
Then in 1878, the circuit was named LaFontaine, and the parsonage was in LaFontaine. That means they were like the headquarters. In 1893, evangelist Estelle Long spoke at a revival. There were over 60 conversions.
What is a conversion?
It is when someone decides to follow Jesus.
Wow, that's like almost as many people that come here on church on Sunday.
Yeah, the church grew so much that they decided to build a new church. When they laid down the cornerstone, the school was canceled so that everyone from miles around could be there. Everyone who gave money for the building got their name on a piece of paper. They put the paper in a tin box and then put it in the cornerstone. Each of the 6 trustees gave $500, which is a lot of money in 1902. The whole thing cost $6,000.
Wait, that means that 6 trustees times 500, the trustees gave $3,000? That was half of the cost.
Yeah, they must have really believed in the ministry that would happen through this building.
And then the government came in and put the reservoir in, and so his church was closed down and buried, torn down and buried. So that's when we started coming up to LaFontaine. So we lived up here. We bought a farm up here in this area, and so we lived up here close to this church, so we decided that's where we needed to go, close to our home. And our 4th child was due in just a few months, and so we started coming to this church at Easter time, and the minister here then was a big help to us when our child was born, and really the church people and the minister supported us so much because she had a birth defect and almost lost her, and we were in Riley for a long time, and so that meant so much to us, that of all of their support, that's why we stayed.
Womanless Wedding, performed in 1930, sponsored by the Methodist Church in LaFontaine. Must have been presented at the high school, LaFontaine High School. Got the proscenium arch with the L over the top, and probably gotten together by Garl sailors. My grandfather referred to him as the Flo Ziegfeld of LaFontaine. He was always the one that was getting up an entertainment. Somebody would do an oratory about something. Someone else would play the piano. Usually my Aunt Dorothy would sing. My grandmother would play. And you can see he's the groom. He's the littlest guy in the picture. And the biggest guy in the picture is the bride. Here's my grandfather. He's the one that's marked with an X, or with a 6. I don't know, his makeup's a little heavy in this one.
What's his name?
Glenn Duffy.
Glenn Duffy.
Yes, and on the back we have some well-known folks. Evidently Reverend Souter, who must have been the preacher here, was in it. He's got there's a number on here. She must have put numbers on as many as she
Turn it
could.
over.
Yeah, he's number 5. Dr. Walker, who was the town doctor, he was in it. Charlie Smallwood.
His wife played the organ here.
Chloe, and there's a Mary S. Eva Vandergrift Howard. Hugh Howard was in it.
Orville Ramsey.
Orville Ramsey. Garl Sailors, he's the groom. Herman Blood. Frank Roberts, who was married to either Ruth Roberts or was her dad. And you can see how pretty the bridesmaids are. And how pretty the bride is. And
Now that's Grandma right there. And do you know who this is? You know who that is. That's Uncle Jim's daddy. And we all sang and we had such a good time. And then as we got a little bit older, we would have an older kids choir. And that's what this was the older kids choir. Now, these were the same time, so I wasn't in this one yet, okay? But you know who that was? That was my mommy. And she was the choir director for these kids. And these kids probably would have been Ariel's, Allison's, and Emily's age.
Pete Mitchell was the pastor when I was in senior high and got married, and I went to camp one year, and I remember him at camp and taking care of a skinned up knee I had, and then he married Bob and I in 1962, and then Howard Rees was influential kind of in our son Terry's life, because Terry was in high school, I believe, at that time.
Joe McVicker was one of the main spiritual leaders in this church, and meant a lot to us and helped us grow. He had some Bible studies, and the ladies that were, there were a couple ladies that were really good Sunday school teachers, and I would say that they helped us grow, and they helped our children too. It's some really favorite teachers, and they have passed away since, but they were great.
One of the ones that stand out to me most prominently is Ruth Foust, an old lady when I was a little bad boy, and she was very patient and very loving, and I've never forgotten that.
I think some of the people that really influenced me was Lorene Cochran as a Sunday school teacher. She was just one of those ladies that always had a smile and a kind word, and you could just tell that her faith runs so deep. And then I took organ lessons from the church, from Juanita Rapp, and Juanita has always been someone that you always knew that you could go to Juanita, and if you had a problem and if you just needed someone to talk to, that she was right there to be willing to listen. Also, Gladys Smith was the janitor when I was taking organ lessons, and any time that I was going over to practice, she didn't want me to be alone in the church, and so I would just call Gladys and say, I'm headed over, and she'd be there, and she'd listen to me practice, and sometimes the practices weren't very good.
my favorite thing about coming to church with my grandmother, Kate Duffy, was going to the sand pile. I loved the sand pile in the little kids' church. Probably wasn't really the nursery, although it might have been, but we still have the sandbox, although nobody ever lets the little kids play in it, which I think is so wrong. All you need, it's in the basement now, and all you need is a couple of little cans of cornstarch powder, and that gets rid of the sand immediately off the little kids' hands, so you don't have to worry about them dragging it around. But that I still remember that, playing in the sandbox. My favorite thing.
I think during the 90s and when my kids were in junior high, high school age was the time when our church was really growing. And that was the time when we had such large youth groups, and they would go on mission trips, and they bonded as a group. And you still, when you have a couple or three of them that get together that maybe haven't seen each other for a while, it's like, do you remember when we went to Oklahoma, or do you remember when we did this, or do you remember? They still have that bond that was formed at that time, and I just think that was just a great growth period for our church.
For Vacation Bible School, for a lot of years, the Methodist and the Christian church went together, and they might have some age groups at the Christian church for Bible school, and then some ages at the Methodist church for Bible school, and had various teachers from both churches then to do that. And sometimes various pastors cooperated better with each other to do that than other times too. I think that was a good thing. The latter years, I don't believe that's happening much, or hasn't, where they combine and go together with Bible school.
Our Sunday school class, I mean, we've been Sunday school attenders ever since we started, and thought Sunday school was important to come to too. And our Sunday school class has been a real support to our family and through all of our troubles, because we've really formed some strong bonds because we've been a class together for so many years, 40, 50 years, you know.
Has always been very, very helpful with coming and people visiting. And I love the church tapes because they connect you with the church, and they furnish church tapes. As long as they've had church tapes, I have enjoyed hearing those each week, and it's been a pleasure to have that service in the church.
I like junior church the best.